Hi, this is Benjamin from Benjamin Krudwig Fiber Arts and Design, and this is lesson 6 of my course on how to crochet a raglan style sweater from the top down. So today we're going to talk about separating the body of the sweater from the sleeves of the sweater. With most raglan style sweaters, they're done knit, and you have circular needles that are holding all of your stitches on to those needles. And when you separate the body from the sleeves, you tend to have to put your sleeves onto some scrap yarn. That way you don't lose the live stitches and you don't drop any stitches. With crochet, since none of your stitches are truly live, except for the one that's on your hook, you don't have to add your stitches onto a piece of extra yarn when you separate the body from the sleeves. So at this point, I have done my final increase row on the top of my sweater. So you can see I have my neckline here. It's a turtleneck, or really more of a mock turtleneck. And you see that I still have all of my stitch markers in my fabric. So at this point, it's very important to try your sweater on. It looks kind of silly when you do it, but it's very, very important to make sure that you're doing it right. I have increased to the point where my chest stitches match what I had calculated. So when I do this, I pull a long loop. That way I don't pull any stitches out. And I just pull my head through. And you see I kind of look like I'm from Star Trek or something, one of those really silly outfits. Maybe even a Time Lord. And what you're going to do is you're going to find your stitch markers on each side. And that can sometimes take some searching. And you're going to pinch them together. This feels pretty good on this side. So I have enough room in the armhole, and I'm sure if I could do it on this side, yep, feels good over here too. So it's just good to kind of just test to make sure that it still fits before you move on to the next step. So now I've made sure that it will fit. I can continue working. So at this point, we're on the back of the sweater, you can see, because I have my white stitch marker here. And what we're going to do is we're going to separate the body from the sleeves. I've crocheted past my stitch marker, my middle stitch marker, and now I'm one of the sides near the armhole. So what I'm going to do is single crochet until I reach my blue stitch marker. And again, my last row was an increase row. So this is kind of taking place of that second row after your increases. So here's my stitch marker. I'm going to remove my stitch marker and single crochet into that stitch. I'm going to skip all of these stitches except for the one that has my other stitch marker in it. So when I take out my stitch marker, I like to pinch the stitch, that way I don't lose it. But if I did, I could easily follow my row of increases, or that line of increases, to find that center stitch. So I'm going to single crochet into that stitch. And I'm going to make sure that my yarn is very, very snug. And then I'm just going to crochet a couple more to show you what just happened. So you can see that I have a new hole here. And it's just connected by these two single crochets that are at the end of where my stitch markers were. And that's where the raglan increases meet. So now I have an armhole and a body. And I'm going to continue crocheting around until I reach the other stitch markers, and I'll repeat the same process. Okay, so I'm coming up on my next stitch marker. I've gone through the front of the sweater, and so now we're going to repeat the same process on this side as we did on the other side with the other armholes. So I'm going to single crochet right up to my stitch marker, pull out my stitch marker, single crochet. I'm going to skip all of these armhole stitches here, and I'm going to pull out my stitch marker and pinch that stitch, insert my hook, and I'm going to single crochet, making sure that it's very taut. And then I'm going to work my way back to that center stitch marker. At this point, we're actually going to change colors when we hit that stitch marker. So normally what we would do is just move the stitch marker, single crochet, and replace this stitch marker. However, because we are changing colors, I want to try a technique in which we finish off this row, and basically we'll bind off, and then we'll add a new color. And we're no longer going to have the back be our center. We're going to start underneath the armhole, and that's just going to be to hide the color change. So you can see I'm just one stitch away from the end. So I'm going to single crochet the final stitch in that row, remove my stitch marker, and then I'm actually just going to slip stitch, break my yarn, leave a small tail so I can weave in the ends, and now we can take a look at what we have. So this is going to look a little strange. We haven't blocked any of this, and the thing about circular crochet is, again, the stitches don't line up right on top of each other. So you can see I have my two armholes in my body hole, and we are ready to switch colors. So I'm going to go from the red to the green. Before we actually start that process, I'm going to talk to you about a different way that you can do these. So I'm going to move my stitch markers. So on that first sweater that I made, you can see along here that it's just a straight line. I didn't change colors underneath the armholes because they only had one skein of this light blue and many more skeins of this gray. So I didn't do any fancy stitch work when I switched from the blue to the gray. I just immediately started going with the gray. So this created a very straight line, and we could do that with this project. However, since this is kind of a Christmassy sweater, I think I'm going to do something a little bit different. So I'm just going to move this sweater and draw your attention over here. So you can see that on this sweater, when I went from the bright green down to the dark green, again, I didn't do it right when I changed color, or changed from the increases to the body. I decided to do a little bit more of the light green and then move to the body. I'm saving this red so I can do the hems and the cuffs in red. So that's why I'm not continuing the red up here. Now you can see that where I did the change, I did what's called a spike stitch. This is a fun little stitch, very, very easy to do. And we're going to do something similar to this, but something just slightly different on this sweater. Alright, so now we're going to start our color change here. You can tell that I've done a spike stitch on this sweater. I'm going to do the same stitch on this sweater right here. So I have the back of my sweater up, facing up. You can tell because I have this spot here. I'm going to just switch it around so I can have it oriented the right way for me to work on it. I'm going to go along to this side of where my armhole is, and there are 2 single crochets here. You can see one on this side, which is the front, and one on this side, which is the back. I'm going to insert my hook into the one that's on the back of the sweater. So we're completely ignoring the armholes for now. That will be in another lesson where we will learn how to continue working on the arms. So I have my green yarn here. Just need to find the end. And I am going to pull through a loop, and then I'm going to chain 1, and that's just to secure my yarn to the sweater. I'm then going to single crochet into that stitch there. I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch, and then I'm going to start my pattern stitches. I'm going to do what's called the spike stitch. And all a spike stitch is that instead of going into the working row, which is just this top row of holes stitches, I'm going to be working into the second and third row from the top. So for this first stitch, I'm going to be working a pattern of 5. So I already did single crochet 1 into the top row, and then the second row, insert my hook and do a single crochet. Then I'm going to go down another row for the next stitch. It's the third row. Go back up to the second row. And then go in the top row. And that's going to give me this nice little triangle here. So I'm going to repeat that. So this portion, I'm going to single crochet into the first row here. Then go down into the second row, single crochet. Then I'm going to go down into the third row and single crochet. Go back up into the second row, single crochet. And then just go up in that top row and single crochet. It's very important to kind of keep the tension on your yarn pretty low. That way you don't squish these stitches down. You really want them to be pretty prominent, and the less tension that you have on the yarn when you're doing the single crochets, the more prominent they'll be. Alright, so I am going to continue around in that pattern and then show you how to continue the body of your sweater. So I'm coming up on the end of this row. And so I'm at the third row in, second row in, and then this first row. I'm going to finish in that last stitch that's underneath the arm. And then just like on the back, instead of binding off this row, I'm just going to single crochet into that first stitch. And I'm going to place a stitch marker. And now I'm just going to single crochet around and keep single crocheting until the body of the sweater is as long as I want it, without the hem. Alright. So join me in the next lesson where I'll teach you how to work on the arms of your sweater. And then in a couple of lessons after that, I'm going to teach you how to properly hem and cuff your sweater, and then finishing your sweater. So that means weaving in your ends, making sure that we wash and block it properly, and I'll go through all of that with you in the next few lessons. So thank you for watching, and come back for more crochet.